Susan Bassey, and I'm actually at the public notices location outside of City Hall in Los Gatos. I'm going to see if anybody's out there and going to come in, but I just want to do a little talk about a public comment that I just made and some things going on in our reporting in the town of Los Gatos. So for anybody who knows, we have been investigating this town for years. The town has a rich history of Johnny Bravo. Love you to pieces for coming in. Both of you boys, you guys must be on speed dial or something. So I just gave a public comment to the town of Los Gatos because this week I have been doing some research on that code enforcement hearing. And the code enforcement hearing involved a controversial resident who is a Trump supporter, which is in the minority here. She's been very vocal. She has a long history. In fact, when I did records requests related to her 4 years ago, the town is still rolling out the records every Friday. I have a puppy. She's here. She got a bath. I want to tell you a cute puppy story that you guys can all appreciate. Those of you who know Puppy comes with me everywhere. We were coming into the town meeting tonight, and there was a man out in front taking photographs, and I took a photograph of him, and he said that they were taking photos for his dating app, and he wanted to borrow Puppy to use on his dating app. So Puppy is in the shot. So if anybody sees Puppy in a dating app, that was fake news because it is not his dog. It was a borrow. So I wanted to talk about this case because it's really disturbing to me. We've been covering these administrative code enforcement hearings in towns up and down the state of California, and this can affect anybody. When a town decides that they don't like a certain resident or something the resident is doing, they can initiate code enforcement proceedings, and those code enforcement proceedings can lead to fines and fees related to, that can make you lose your home. And so this case in particular, this woman, her name is Miss Hogan, and she was in family court years ago and was upset that her ex-husband wasn't paying child support, so she was posting some flyers around town about it. And the Los Gatos police were taking the flyers down. So I'm not really sure what the reasoning for that was. We are having law enforcement take flyers down. That sounds like a civil issue, but nonetheless, it kept going and going. And they started to impose code enforcement proceedings against her because she was doing short-term rentals in Los Gatos. And they said that she didn't have the proper permit and she was going to have to change the zoning ordinances in order to be able to do that. And that was her main source of income, was renting out rooms. She even rented it to a real estate couple for a weekend, and there was a Showtime production filmed inside of her home. And so she had this long history with the town, and it was before Airbnbs came out that they were really aggressively going after her for these short-term rentals. And during all of that, there was a 5150, meaning when she came down to the town one day in the middle of the day, she got into it with the police, complaining about being selectively kind of targeted. And after that, the police immediately took her for an involuntary mental health hold. And that was in 2012. So I've been getting all these records over the last 4 years, and there's a lot of records. And recently, the town started a new code enforcement proceeding against her for her political signs related to the 2024 election. And she may have done some of it back in 2020, I'm not quite sure, but this started right before the election in 2024. And when I went to the code enforcement hearing, if you look through my videos, I did a video on it, I was a little bit surprised that the administrative judge was a divorce attorney who started to, he was a divorce attorney who claimed to also be a private judge. And for those of you who follow this work, you know that I report a lot on private judging, and that's the legal scheme in California where an attorney or anybody can be appointed to be a private judge. They're paid, and it legally could be considered legalized bribery in the court system, and it's primarily used in family law cases. It's different than arbitration, and it's different than mediation. So it was interesting to watch this proceeding, and then I tried to get the records, and the contracted town attorney told me she would help me get the records from this city clerk's office. So then I did a video about how difficult it was for me to get those records. And then I learned when they finally did give me the records 3 days later, which they should have given me access to those records. 3 days later, they produced the records, and I knew the records weren't complete, that they didn't include the disclosure that this individual private judge presiding over the code enforcement hearing had sent to Ms. Hogan. So I made a little bit of a stink about that. And today, if you look in my community posts, I did a new records request, a formal written one, where I wrote down everything that I want to see related to this private judge, because he is apparently a commissioner in this town, and he's a commissioner for handling issues related to seniors and mental health. And after the code enforcement hearing, this woman is suing 2 town council members and an individual by the name of Lee Fagot, and I had mispronounced it, and today a city council member corrected me on the pronunciation of his name, and which was inappropriate, because, and I commented on, well, good thing, because I had asked for public records. I want to know how closely related our elected officials and town employees are to this individual. So this individual runs a group called Democracy Tent. And in his court filings, he said it was a nonprofit. So I looked up the tax ID number for the nonprofit, and none existed. So I asked him for the tax ID number, and he said, oh, we're not a nonprofit. And so in the legal proceeding with 2 elected town council members, he represented that Democracy Tent was a nonprofit when it wasn't. And he knew it wasn't, and he didn't correct that. So there is starting to be an appearance that this town is really bullying and punching down on somebody who, one, went through the family court system here and had some problems, when we have lots of those cases in Los Gatos. And I referenced the fact that a family court judge once wanted to do it right along with the Los Gatos police as he was presiding over family law cases and domestic violence cases here in Los Gatos. And that was shocking, because some of the worst cases were before him in family court. We're gonna go chase down Puppy for a minute, so it might get a little dark. And so I brought that up in my 3-minute comment today, and one of these elected officials asked about that judge doing a ride-along. I also referenced that the town attorney is aware now that after that administrative proceeding, Pep, come back here. I know you want to go swimming, you're not swimming. And so after that town public code enforcement hearing, the private judge who was presiding over the code enforcement hearing literally then started communicating with Ms. Hogan, and actually said that he wanted her to consider dismissing her lawsuit against the town officials. So I want you to think about how outrageous this is. He is a divorce attorney presiding over a code enforcement proceeding, and he is also trying to mediate a settlement and get somebody to drop a lawsuit when he has no authority to do that. Attorneys are not allowed to communicate with represented parties or parties in a lawsuit about the lawsuit if they, in fact, they have to have permission to do that. And he didn't have permission to do that. He spoke to her, he wrote her emails, he didn't copy in the town, and this is why the code enforcement issue was before them. Then the town attorney, Miss Sydney Whalen, who's also been in some of my videos, sent Ms. Hogan an email saying that, well, there would be another administrative judge in the next code enforcement hearing, just as if it was a bump and a run, and they could violate her rights, give her an unfair administrative judge who is obviously connected politically here, and try to pressure her to dismiss a lawsuit. And he did so claiming that the town doesn't have very much money. So when you see me focusing on not just police officers, but the attorneys, that's why I'm doing it. Because it's not just what we see on the street with police officers, but what these attorneys are doing both in the courtroom where there are no cameras, but also in these administrative proceedings, and they're woven throughout our county government. Hi, Lisa, nice to see you here. So that is what I made a public comment about, and an elected official asked me some questions about when it was that Judge Towery was asking to do a ride-along. And in fact, he asked to do a ride-along when he was presiding over one of the worst cases in Los Gatos. It was a case involving Los Gatos police and them making a bad call. It was a case of an immigrant woman who came here, and she's actually now begging the federal government to deport her son because she lost custody of her son and to a man who wasn't even the child's father after he brought him here to Los Gatos. And so we're going to keep reporting on that. We're going to keep putting together the dots and showing you how that big picture looks. Because when we can do that in one area at a local level, it will help you all see how it applies to other small areas and communities. And I don't report on national politics. I don't report on what's going on in the federal government. I report on local. And right now, what's going on in the town of Los Gatos with code enforcement and politics and these attorneys is really problematic. So now we're also going to see what the Los Gatos police does about it, because it's actually a crime, obstruction of justice related to trying to interfere with a legal process. And we're going to find out whether or not the attorneys and the police in Los Gatos are going to do an investigation about that and see what's going on with this Jeff Blum, who acted as a administrative code enforcement hearing officer, as he was also being a private judge, not complying with the law in the cases where he was a private judge. So I'm going to see if you guys have any questions. Carlos doesn't deserve his bar card. Johnny, if you notice, if you guys look at my videos, and by the way, YouTube started this new procedure where you can hype videos, and that has taken the place of trending videos. And you guys have been hyping my videos, and I really appreciate it. You have to do it within 7 days of a video dropping. I tried to do that on some other small creators. It applies to small creators, which I qualify for because I'm under 500,000, a long ways under 500,000 subscribers. And so when you hype my videos, apparently that is supposed to help. But if you notice, when I'm talking about these attorneys who are lying on their bar applications and committing horrendous crimes against not only their own clients, but others in the public, and when I start talking about these private judges, my video views are going way down. We call that shadow banning. And the one thing that I've noticed that is not being shadow banned are these live streams. So it is a way for me to communicate what I am investigating, and I'm backing up my work. And tonight I made a public comment. And if you look in the community posts on my channel, I also posted the public records request that I did related to this investigation. And those, even though I'm using California law and citing that in the request, it is something that all of you can do. If you want to make a public records request, I remind you, don't do it in your name, do it in another name, use an email, ask for it to be produced on a rolling basis, and then also have it sent to that email address or to another address that is not yours, because retaliation for public records requests is very real. And I have been watching some of the smaller creators. I think it was at Johnny Bravo or John Denicola. I saw a video that you had related to going in and asking for records. And you guys were polite, you were respectful, you asked for the record, you asked to look around. In fact, there was a hearing, a personnel hearing going on, and somebody asked to see the stained glass windows. And I just want you to remember that everywhere we go in these public buildings, and here, taxpayers pay for this. We have a right to see it, we have a right to inspect it, and we also have a right to get our public records without waiting 4 years for them. So as Los Gatos begs for money and claims that the federal government is gonna have funding cuts that is gonna affect them in an adverse way, I want you to remember that when they had all the money in the world, they still weren't complying with the public records laws, and they weren't in any big hurry to give us our records. And public records show us the business of our government, whether it's locally or nationally. And for all of you guys who are making records requests, I really appreciate it, because it takes an army to do this, and the government will always behave badly when they're given a chance. So let's keep making public comments, keep doing public records requests. I'll keep writing articles and keep making videos so that we can create a free press, because that really is the free press, is when the public is watchdogging their local government. So thank you, everybody. Puppy had a bath. She's in a dating app photo somewhere. If somebody ever finds that, if you send it to me, I'd really appreciate it. And I try to read all your comments, and I try to read any emails that you send me. Please keep them short and focused so that I can try to understand what's going on. And if any of my work helps you with the problems you're facing, then I'm happy to do this work. And I always, always appreciate your support. And that means coming in on these live streams. It means hyping the videos. It means making comments. It means doing the support with membership dollars. And for all of you who send me t-shirts or send me things in the mail, I really appreciate that too. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a good night. Thanks for coming in so late.